Yeah, so my business kind of started when I qualified as a lawyer and a chartered accountant in Canada many years ago. And I was working in oil and gas taxation of all places. And I happened to immigrate to Australia. And it was actually really difficult to get working permits here. So I ended up sort of pivoting, using my skills, but doing something slightly different with them. I worked for a number of companies. I was managing a huge coalition loyalty program that had 21 different brands in it. And I had to look at the data that we had from the card users and try to figure out how do we drive profitable growth in those businesses. And those businesses included Kmart and Target, Budget, Best Western, the biggest grocery store that we have over here. So it was a real good cross section of different businesses. And that's where I fell in love with coaching and working with businesses. And so basically I decided to become a full-time cash flow expert and coach, working with businesses to maximize their cash flow capabilities. And if they had working capital deficiencies, figure out strategies and ways that they could bridge those or fund those by going out into the marketplace, talking to banks and fintechs. Through my journey, I happened to write this book called Financial Foreplay. So it's a little bit of a shocking title for people, but the reason I did it, the reason I wrote it is I know that people either two things, hate talking about money or are terrified to talk about their money. So I wrote Financial Foreplay because for me, it's about using what I know about brain-friendly learning and coaching techniques to make stuff that's scary and intimidating fun, memorable, and interesting. So to me, it's not just a book title. It's a whole philosophy of how I do things differently. So I'm super protective of my brand because to me, it's about something more than just money and finances. It's about making these things really accessible and interesting and memorable to other people. So this was in 2009, I wrote the book. A couple years later, I trademarked it. And then in 2020, this is right when COVID was hitting, June of 2020, I just happened to notice that some person I had never heard of in my life was using my registered trademark to run her own podcast. And so, that's kind of how it started. And I thought, silly me, I thought because she's a fellow finance business professional, that, if I just went to her and said, hey, we need to chat about this. Perhaps you don't know I have a trademark. We could just sort it all out really amicably and it would be super easy. But I was very, very wrong in that assumption.
You wrote the book back in 2009. When did you launch your Financial Foreplay podcast?
When I did the actual trademark registration, it was before podcasting was really big, right? So it wasn't on most people's radar. So I was protecting things like books, financial advice, money management, credit management, financial education, that sort of thing. So podcasting wasn't on my radar at all. I only started podcasting after the fact. It was actually even after her podcast. But to me, that wasn't the point because I wasn't actually raising a statement of claim to chase her because she was using it in a podcast. I took umbrage with the fact that she was using it to promote financial advice and education, which I had clearly protected. To be fair, I've been using that term pretty much exclusively globally since 2009. And really, no one has ever challenged me. I've never had to write a cease and desist letter. I've never had to threaten to take somebody else to court. It actually really shocked me because I think most people, when they hear the term financial foreplay, know that I have come up with it because not only did I write books and sell thousands of those books. So I do speaking. I've been the national speaker for MYOB, which is an accounting software. I've toured with them and presented to 5,000 business owners in 1 month. I've toured with Intuit, not just in Australia, but also, I've presented in San Jose at their big conference in front of, hundreds and thousands of people, this brand. And so to me, most people know that I created it. I've trademarked it. And I think that, in the industry, by and large, bookkeepers, accountants, finance people are super respectful. It wouldn't even cross their mind, I don't reckon, to take somebody else's stuff because it would be embarrassing. But she wasn't embarrassed at all. she felt entitled to use it. And that was the difference.
What was the role of some of the tech platforms as you were going through this?
Oh, look, Podbean is disgraceful. I would never recommend anybody use that brand. I don't like to disparage anybody, but look, I applied using, there's like a process to apply to have trademark material taken down. Every platform has one, right? So I applied using that normal mechanism and I provided my trademark certificates. And then Podbean basically, went back to her and said, what do you think about this? And, if you don't answer, we're going to take your podcast down. So the very next thing that happened is I started getting legal threats. So her lawyer, her solicitor, instead of just saying, hey, we've got a problem here, there's a registered trademark, we can see certificates, they started denying the validity of my trademark. She went to IP Australia and put her name in front of Financial Foreplay and tried to trademark that for not only podcasting, but for financial advice and education. And this was all in sort of November of 2020. So IP Australia gets back to her quick smart. In the letters, not only do they point out my valid pre-existing trademark, they happen to say, look, you can't just put your name in front of somebody else's trademark because the dominant and unique element of this thing is Financial Foreplay, not your name. It's Financial Foreplay. It belongs to someone else. And you are trying to register it for the exact same classes of goods and services, being financial advice and education, right? And the thing that really put me over the edge is we call them adverse examination reports. So IP Australia writes an adverse examination report and then basically rejects your application. They were in possession of these pieces of paper. They could not have reasonably believed that they had any right whatsoever to use my trademark because they were being rejected by IP Australia. Despite that, they went to Podbean, to Facebook, and to Apple iTunes of all places and told them in writing, and it was a quote, that she had the legal right to use my trademark, right? And their argument was that I didn't have the podcasting class at that time, which I do now, but I didn't have it at this time. And their argument was, a financial planner using my brand, my trademark in a podcast that was financial and accounting advice wasn't. That it was just inspirational material, inspirational stories and material, and it didn't constitute financial advice or education. And I understand that in addition to that, a legal declaration was even signed with Facebook. And a legal declaration is actually pretty serious stuff, right? So when you sign a legal declaration, you're essentially saying you're swearing to something. So it's a sworn statement, and you can face an action for perjury for making an inaccurate declaration. Now, the judge noted, and this is important, the judge noted in his decision that when they were telling these platforms like Podbean, Facebook, and iTunes that they had legal rights they did not have, they neglected to tell them they'd been knocked back twice by IP Australia. They just omitted that. And let's be honest. If you've been told you are rejected and you can't use it because it's the same or deceptively similar to someone's pre-existing trademark, withholding that information is like lying, isn't it? Because it's a material aspect of your claim. If you're going to say you got a legal right and you withhold the fact that IP Australia told you that you don't have any legal rights, then to me, that's not an accurate statement. It's deceptive. It's misleading. And, that's the part that was really tough, because if Facebook, Podbean, and iTunes had simply taken the content down, there wouldn't have been a statement of claim raised in the court or a trial.
I think it was before we started recording that she had a decent social media following, and she encouraged her followers to go after you on social media. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, look, I don't know exactly how it happened. And remember, I didn't really know who she was, but she had about maybe 30,000 followers or something on Instagram and about 120 on YouTube. So she had quite a few people. And what started happening is these people started coming to my Instagram and calling me things like a thief and a liar, and you've misrepresented your legal rights. And people were just, calling me a scammer, and they were attacking me. And I thought, this is really weird, right? So I started looking into who these people were. Now, one of these people, the person who said I misrepresented my legal rights, was her talent manager. And he's out attacking me about saying, I'm misrepresenting my legal rights. And I could be wrong, but I don't think this guy's an IP lawyer, right? Like, I think, maybe he's a talent manager, maybe he's good at what he does, but he's no IP lawyer. So the only way that he could have an opinion like that I'm misrepresenting my legal rights, would be that he must have spoken to somebody, right? And that somebody is likely to be the person who was infringing on my trademark rights. And, I just found it interesting. I also had her podcast production guy said I stole from his client. And I'm thinking, stole what? Everything I was saying was based in law. So I had a right to enforce my rights. And the interesting part is that even Podbean and, even the judge said that I was wholly within my rights to go to Podbean and Facebook and ask all those people to take it down because I was the legitimate holder. So I can't possibly be sued. But the thing that really put me over the edge is another podcaster who is actually even more well-known over here for finance sent me a screenshot. And in that screenshot, I saw that she had posted on her Instagram that she was being cyber bullied and harassed. She made claims that, it was so bad that she was going to have to get an intervention order to protect the safety of her family. Like, it was a huge sob story. So not only was what she's saying to them not even correct in trademark law, and that's my favorite part of the trial was when the judge intervened in the middle of the trial, because the judge can ask whatever he wants, right? The judge can pop in anytime he wants. And he's like, hold on a second here. He goes, in this, communication, what you're saying here isn't even correct based on trademark law. So what you said is based on, advice you got from your lawyers gave you bad advice. And the judge made her barrister have to basically admit that, concede it. I don't think that Hollywood, right, could even conceive of something as ridiculous as this, because you just wouldn't expect it. A normal, scenario would be that the person gets the cease and desist. And don't forget, I actually sent her 2 and she ignored both of those. And then I had to, about maybe another 12 months later, I had to send another cease and desist to a media company in Sydney, because during the point where I was already suing her, she was being promoted to speak at a conference for financial advisors in Sydney and in Melbourne. And they were using my brand, Financial Foreplay.
Oh, man.
And she was going to talk about how much money she'd made from her podcast, right? So this woman is sitting in court arguing that she didn't make any money from her podcast, but yet this speaking announcement said she's going to tell everybody how she made money from her podcast. And I'm thinking, is this real? And then she, under oath when she testified, this is funny stuff. Under oath when she testified, she said that had made a mistake and that they had never hired her to speak about that. But coincidentally, we'd subpoenaed her talent manager to get the documents. So we said, give us the contract, give us the invoice, give us the rate card, how you negotiated this, give us the speaker bio so we can see who gave the speaker bio that had my brand in it, and also give us any communications about what you were hired to speak about. And they ignored the subpoena.
So where do you go from here?
Look... that's a really good question, because this is tiring.
What I'm trying to do, Rhondalynn, is I'm trying to get us to, beyond the clouds. We're clear blue skies. Everything's back to the way that it should be. What does that look like for you, your business, your podcast, and the like?
Yeah. Well, look, 2 things I want to do is I'm going to definitely relaunch Financial Foreplay. So I'm going to be going out with a really different, like fresh and new, unique approach to this thing. So I'm changing the format of the way that I'm going to do the podcast. We might actually add video on top of it. I'm going to get a different type of guest to come in. I may even expand the scope.
Rhondalynn, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story. For folks that are listening to this podcast right now, where can they find you?
Look, the easiest is just look up Rhondalynn, because there's only probably one of me. It's an unusual name. So if you just type in Rhondalynn, you're likely to find. But also you can find me via Financial Foreplay. You know, I've written a few books: Sales Seduction, Pricing Value, On the Shoulders of Giants. But Financial Foreplay is the one that really, I think, sticks in most people's minds. That's really the brand that I think most people know me by.
Well, yeah. Rhondalynn, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much.